Chapter 1. Martak's eyes narrowed, ears perked forward as he inspected the readouts from the antimatter generator's diagnostic systems. A half-dozen junior engineers huddled around him, observing his every move. "Increased ion flux here." He pointed a clawed finger at one of the flickering holographic displays. "Likely a faulty containment coil. We'll need to run a full subatomic resonance scan to pinpoint the compromised segment before shutdown procedures." The young Indrylum nodded, ears twitching with a mixture of apprehension and excitement at being part of such a critical maintenance procedure. Martak rotated the display, cycling through pages of data at a dizzying pace. "Salrin, initiate the harmonic pulse sequence." The purple-furred engineer tapped a series of commands into the generator's control interfaces. Martak scrutinized the output, his long snout wrinkling. Not quite right. More amplitude on the tertiary wave. Salrin's ears flattened in embarrassment, but he quickly adjusted the parameters. This time the hologram flickered green, optimal resonance achieved. "Better," Martak nodded in approval. "Now we can pinpoint the microfracture." He turned to face the others, catching their rapt gazes. Despite his often brusque manner, the sight of curious young minds eager to learn stirred something in Martak's core. These were his people, his kin. Their continued mastery of technology would ensure the prosperity of Law N for generations to come. "Document everything you've observed here today," he instructed. "From the initial diagnostics through the containment failure analysis. Precise record-keeping is the foundation upon which all great engineering rests." Martak rotated the hologram once more, claws dancing across the controls as he dissected layers of the generator's schematics. His eyes glinted with the spark of intellectual hunger, an intriguing new puzzle to unravel. "Once the containment coil is replaced, I want a complete realignment performed to prevent any further ion flux." As he outlined the next steps, Martak couldn't resist smiling inwardly. This is where he belonged, in the heart of the most complex technological challenges. The work was never done, and he relished every moment. The shrill wail of the city's defense sirens shattered the relative calm of Martak's engineering lab. He snapped to attention, ears erect and swiveling to pinpoint the source of the distress signal. A cacophony of explosions rumbled in the distance, the ground trembling beneath his feet. The holographic schematics winked out as the power wavered. Salrin and the other junior engineers looked to Martak with wide, terrified eyes. "Raiders!" he growled, the word dripping with disdain. "We're under attack!" Martak raced from the lab, claws skidding on the polished floor as he rounded a corner toward the city's defensive command center. Thick plumes of oily smoke billowed from the direction of the outer residential sectors. His heart hammered with a mixture of fury and dread. They would pay dearly for this transgression. Sleek Indrylum interceptors streaked overhead, emerald ion cannons blazing as they engaged the pirate vessels swarming over the city's force field. Martak skidded to a halt, shielding his eyes as one of the marauding ships erupted in a blossom of flame, twisted debris raining from the sky. "Martak!" a familiar voice called out. He spun to see his lifelong friend and sparring partner, Calrin, hurrying toward him. "The civilian shelters have been breached in the Tora district. We need to evacuate before the force field fails." Martak's jaw clenched, his tail lashing. Calrin may have been a peerless warrior, but there would be no retreat. Not while their city and their people remained under siege. "Get as many civilians clear as you can," he barked. "I'm going to see if I can reinforce the defensive grid before the generators are compromised." Calrin opened his mouth as if to protest, then simply nodded. They both knew there was no reasoning with Martak once his mind was made up. With a respectful dip of his head, the soldier turned and raced back toward the smoke-choked residential blocks. Martak broke into a loping run, talons scratching for purchase on the pavement as he made for the central power nexus. A pirate fighter shrieked overhead, strafing the streets with searing plasma fire. He flattened himself against the side of a building as a hail of scorched debris clattered around him. Baring his fangs in a defiant snarl, Martak pressed onward. If the city's defensive systems failed, he would ensure the enemy paid for every inch of ground, no matter the cost. The defensive grid shuddered under the relentless pounding of the pirate onslaught. Martak raced through the dimly lit corridors of the central power nexus, talons skidding on the rubble-strewn floor as another distant explosion rocked the facility. Flashing status panels painted the narrow space in an eerie crimson glow. Gritting his fangs, Matak slammed his hand against the primary control interface, desperately rerouting auxiliary power to reinforce the failing force field matrices. For a few precious moments, the defensive barrier flickered with renewed strength, only to gutter and fizzle as a fresh barrage of artillery fire rained down from the pirate ships, screaming overhead. Acrid smoke billowed through the shattered windows as consoles erupted in showers of sparks. Matak staggered, slamming his palms against the unyielding metal as system after system went critically offline around him. Loren's defenses had been breached. The city was falling. He slumped to the floor, chest heaving as the weight of their failure bore down on him. So many calculations, so much planning and preparation. Undone by these mindless brigands pillaging their way across the galaxy, with the Confederation doing nothing but lip service to stop them. A piercing screech split the air as one of the pirate vessels bore down on the power nexus, raking the compound with blistering plasma fire. Matak threw himself behind an overturned bank of equipment as shrapnel and debris exploded all around him. Snarling defiance, he pounded the buckled floor in impotent rage. He dedicated his life to the defense of his people, to the principles of innovation and technological mastery, and now it lay in smoldering ruins at the hands of these parasites. The sound of rending metal and splintering permacrete made his ears flatten against his skull. The pirates were entering the facility, no doubt seeking captives to ransom or enslave. Matak's hackles bristled at the thought. Better to die defending what little remained than to suffer such indignities. Bracing himself, he unsheathed his talons and bared his fangs, ready to unleash a lifetime's worth of fury upon the first enemies to show themselves. He would not go quietly into the night. Not while his heart still pounded with the fire of defiance. The power nexus shook again as another deafening explosion ripped through the compound. Choking smoke and dust flooded the corridor, stinging Matak's eyes. He crouched lower, awaiting the inevitable onslaught. It never came. Only an eerie, oppressive silence descended over the ruined facility. After what felt like an eternity, Matak dared to raise his head, blinking against the hazy gloom. The pirate ship had disengaged, its barrage of destruction apparently sated. For now. Coughing, he hauled himself upright and emerged into the shattered ruin of the power nexus's central chamber. All around him, the scattered remnants of Loren's defensive systems smouldered and sparked. The once mighty city had fallen. His home, his life's work, his entire world, reduced to ash and rubble. Matak sank to his haunches, numb grief and disbelief crashing over him in waves. What remained now but to rebuild? To start anew amongst the embers of everything he'd ever known? The distant wail of sirens pierced the stillness. Search and rescue teams would soon be combing the wreckage. Matak rose unsteadily, his mind already turning over possibilities for salvaging what little technological components may have survived the devastation intact. Matak surveyed the ruins of Loren, his ears flat against his skull. The acrid stench of smoke and charred wreckage hung heavy in the air, a bitter reminder of all they had lost. In the days following the pirate raid, a numb shock had settled over the Indrylum survivors. So many lives shattered, so much knowledge and history reduced to smouldering embers. Yet the resiliency of his people shone through, engineers and builders sifting through the rubble, already plotting how to rise from the ashes. A soft tread of footsteps made Matak turn. Calren approached, his rust-coloured fur matted and his eyes haunted. The soldier dipped his head in a solemn greeting. The Confederation emissaries have arrived to discuss relocation options. Calren's mouth twisted with distaste, as if being driven from their ancestral home was somehow a merciful act. Matak's tail lashed, claws scoring the permacrete underfoot. We should refuse their hollow overtures and rebuild here, on the bones of what was taken from us. But even as he spoke the words, doubt gnawed at him. Could their dwindling population, their fractured resources, truly recover from such a devastating blow? Perhaps it was time to consider other paths. One by one, more of their kin emerged from the wreckage to listen to the Confederation's proposals. Colonies in need of skilled labourers and technicians. Fledgling settlements desperate for the engineering expertise the Indrylum could provide. Matak's gaze swept over the solemn, soot-stained faces. So much potential still burned in their eyes. To let it be squandered amid the ruins would be a tragedy beyond measure. Kalren shifted uncomfortably beside him. I know how much this place means to you, my friend, but there is no shame in seeking greener pastures, if that is what it takes to preserve our people. Shame. No, Martak felt no shame. Only a profound sense of loss and a simmering anger toward the very forces that had allowed such devastation to transpire unchecked. His claws flexed as he studied the emissaries from the Confederation. Bureaucrats in pristine uniforms, their words dripping with simpering pity as they postured about humanitarian relocation. As if ripping them from their homeworld was some great act of charity. Perhaps in time, they would rebuild here on the ashes of Law N. Or perhaps a new path lay elsewhere, one forged from the indomitable spirit of their species. Wherever that road led, Martak vowed to walk it with unbowed head and a burning determination. They would rise again, through resilience, through mastery of technology, through the strength that flowed through every strand of their DNA. The skills that made them Indrylum could never be taken away. Not by raiders, nor the uncaring policies of the Confederation itself. Martak stood at the edge of the landing platform, gazing out over the rubble-strewn ruins of Law N. Plumes of smoke still coiled upwards, mingling with the sulphurous stench of scorched permacrete and ozone. So many memories echoed through those shattered streets and crumbling facades. Lifetimes worth of innovation, discovery, and camaraderie, now naught but ghostly whispers amid the devastation. A heavy hand landed on his shoulder. Martak turned to see Kalren, his oldest friend's expression etched with the same haunted grief mirrored in his own heart. You're really leaving, then? The soldier's ears flattened, his usual bravado muted. Martak simply nodded, swallowing hard against the lump burning in his throat. What was there to say? The pirate raids had laid waste to everything he'd ever known. Though their people's spirit remained unbroken, the shadows of that traumatic onslaught would forever stain Loren's legacy. A fresh start was required, a new forge in which to rekindle the flames of innovation. Kalren pulled him into a fierce embrace, the familiar scent of scorched ozone and machine oil woven through his friend's pelt. Be well, brother, he murmured gruffly. The path before you will be difficult, but I know if anyone can blaze a new trail, it's you. Martak could only nod, blinking rapidly against the sting of unshed tears. With a final clasp of forearms, he turned and strode toward the sleek personnel shuttle awaiting him on the landing pad. A few other Indrylum milled about, clutching what few possessions they could carry. Like Martak, they had volunteered to join the newly established off-world colony being constructed by the Primaris Initiative, a chance to start anew on fresh soil, unburdened by the weight of past tragedies. Taking a deep breath, Martak boarded the shuttle and strapped himself into one of the passenger couches. Through the viewports, he could see Kalren and a handful of others gathered at the edge of the landing field, solemn farewell silhouettes against the backdrop of their once gleaming city. His gaze lingered on that vista of ruin for a few heartbeats longer. Then, with a trembling sigh, Martak forced himself to look away as the shuttle's engines rumbled to life. There was no going back, only the uncertainty of the future spreading out ahead of him like the endless star-flecked cosmos itself. Untamed, unexplored, and brimming with possibilities just waiting to be unraveled. A fresh start, a new forge to rekindle the flames of innovation. As the shuttle's repulsor lifts engaged and Loren's ashen remains shrank beneath them, Martak felt a flicker of that old, familiar determination flare to life in his core. He was an engineer, a builder, and a dreamer. And on the fertile new world of Novus Primaris, perhaps he could sow the seeds of redemption from the ashes of his people's suffering. The journey ahead would not be easy, but as the shuttle pierced the inky obsidian of the heavens, Martak's spirit burned bright with renewed purpose. It was time to begin anew.